On today's show, we find out who we need to key on if we want to win big and send a message to the rest of the league, how the weather will affect the passing game, and why it may not be as tough to beat a team 3 times as you think. All this and more. Remember, you can listen on Apple and Spotify or watch on YouTube, as all links are in the description below. You're inside the Johnny Dell Football Academy. Hello, Niner faithful, and welcome to the Johnny Dell Football Academy podcast on the channel that's trying to find the whys and hows of the game. I am Adam Marino, as always, joined by, dare I say, gracing our presence, is Mr. Johnny Dell. What is up? Are we excited for Saturday at 1:30 Pacific time or what?
I'm super excited because this is a game, if you ever talk about a softball opening week of the playoffs, this should be it for the 49ers. I know all fans are worried. It's the Seahawks. I think there's some fan PTSD going on here, right? Is that we have had so many bad losses or rough losses to the Seahawks since Pete Carroll's been there that it's hard for us to believe that we're just going to walk away with this, or that we have this game won before Seattle's even stepped foot in the stadium. But this is a game that when you really start looking at the matchup, Seattle does not belong here. And so really, I'm excited. I'm excited about the game, to see the team cruise to win and then have, maybe 7-8 days off before the next game. This is one of those, when the schedule first came out, I thought, man, they're putting San Francisco on the short week. They're putting them on Saturday. But then as the more I've thought about it, I go, yeah, but this should be an easy win. We shouldn't need all 7 days, and then we get an extra day of rest before the next week. So I'm excited about it. I think this is going to be a good opening week to the playoffs.
Awesome. I'm excited to talk playoffs. Now, before we get into this week's game, our opponent, all of that, I want to talk a little memories, playoff memories. So I want to ask you, actually, maybe, what's 2 of your favorite Niner playoff memories? Just, it may not even be like, it's hard to say like, oh, these are my all-time favorite. I get that. But maybe 2 that when you hear the question, what are 2 that jump out to you? And I'll give you time even to think a little bit, because I'll give you a couple of mine. And the first one that came to mind was, as I said before, it doesn't have to be your absolute favorite, and this isn't my absolute, but it's one that just comes to mind when I think of Alex Smith and all of the things that he went through as far as a different coach. Every time he went to change his socks, he looked up and, oh, there was a different coach. So once the organization became more stable for him, you saw him grow on the field. And as a fan, it was exciting to see. And so that run against New Orleans was just, to me, like the epitome of, I'm him. Like, I am Alex Smith, and I am formidable, and I'm not just the game manager. And I hate to say, maybe he still kind of was, but in that moment, he wasn't. In that moment, he was not the game manager, and the fire and the passion was just really cool to see. And so that's up there. And then as I was I was 13 years old and really falling in love with sports and music, like full time. Like when you're a kid and you're like, yeah, the 49ers, and you don't really know what's going on. At 13, I knew what was going on. And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that we were going to drop about 50 points on San Diego. And we did in the Super Bowl. And I still have my newspaper clippings. I was like the biggest fan. I had all that stuff saved. I still have it. And just that memory, I'm left-handed. Steve Young was my idol. He's left-handed. Just that moment, was huge. And so those 2 moments for me always stand out. So what are yours?
So for me, if I was to say the biggest playoff memory for me would be the catch two. I was 14 at the time, and those of us who were 49ers fans around the time would remember all the ties that we had with the team. That you had Steve Mariucci was the head coach, and he had been the quarterbacks coach for Mike Holmgren in Green Bay. Before that, Mike Holmgren had been the quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator for Bill Walsh in San Francisco before that, and had been the offensive coordinator under George Seifert. And there was a big to-do that, of when Bill was going to retire, who was going to be the next head coach. Was it going to be George, or was it going to be Mike Holmgren? And they picked Seifert. And so Holmgren had this kind of desire. He wanted to be the coach in San Francisco. And the belief was that if Mariucci lost, that Holmgren was going to be leaving Green Bay and go back to San Francisco, and he would be the head coach. And if Mariucci won, then he was going to be able to keep his job, and people knew that Holmgren was probably going to go off to Seattle. And that changed the trajectory of the two franchises for a while. But everything that game meant, they're running the same offense, they know each other so well, and the rivalry that was always, to me as a fan of Steve Young or Brett Favre as the quarterback of the later 90s in that era of who was the top quarterback in the league. And so that game just had so much. And then Terrell Owens having 5 drops early in that game, and he was still a young player, and being able to come back from those 5 drops to make that huge catch at the end of the game for when it mattered, and it was so improbable. That to me was one of the greatest memories as a fan growing up for the playoffs. The other one, it's almost tied. I would say if there was a moment or a game, if it's a moment, to me, the opening play of Dallas-San Francisco in the NFC Championship game of 1994, when Eric Davis has the pick 6 on Troy Aikman. That play was so memorable for me, and I was 11 years old when that happened. And just knowing, actually I was 10, knowing the impact that had immediately, and that set the tone of what that game was going to be, because Dallas was the monster that San Francisco could not slay for several years, right? So to have that as that would be as far as a specific moment. Number 2, game would be the huge comeback against the Giants in 2002. Was when we overcame the huge deficit. We got down big early in the game, and it was the greatest playoff comeback of all time. Unfortunately, then that next week we got rolled by Tampa Bay, who ended up going and winning the Super Bowl. But as far as that game, I think just because of what they had to overcome being so far down, and I will always remember Terrell Owens scoring a touchdown and Michael Strahan running up to him and pointing at the scoreboard, because we were still down. And it was pointing at the scoreboard to say, yeah, we're still up. We still are going to win this game. To then come back over that and to win, I would say is that might be the second best moment of the playoffs for me.
Man, that just brings back so many memories. The no call on that field goal. You mentioned the catch too. What about the fumble by Jerry Rice?
It was not ruled a fumble on the field, okay? It was not ruled a fumble.
I hate to...
Packers fans will still show up with signs at the games that say Jerry fumbled, Rice fumbled. I just say I'm happy that they didn't have instant replay at that time.
No question about it. And that moment still gives me goosebumps. Love just when he went to Mooch and was just sobbing. Those aren't tears. He was legit, like when your 2-year-old is just sobbing and you can't get them to stop. That was T.O. on the sidelines. Mm-hmm. And it was just incredible to see that emotion. And a lot of fans were sobbing as well at that point, I'm sure.
And if you watch the broadcast, the call at the time of Owens,
he got it.
Owens, that's one of those legendary calls. I mean, you will just, you can like hear it, you can feel it. It is there in your memory. Catch 2. And I would dare say that the catch three just was not the same. Now, while it was a great moment, it was a fantastic moment. The catch two, just to me, because it embodied so much of that season and so much of the careers of Steve Young and Mariucci and what that game meant to everything and just all of it. It's why we love football, right? It's those moments is why we love football. And so just there's so much in there. And while we as fans hate the close game in the moment, right? We hate it. We would much prefer the 94 Super Bowl in every playoff game ever, but we don't remember those games as well. We don't have that great memory. Like when we talk about these great playoff memories, we're not talking about the Minnesota 2019 game. We're not talking about the Green Bay 2019 game, right? We're talking about you're looking at like the 88 Super Bowl where
we don't even talk 55-10.
We don't talk to the 89 Super Bowl. We talk the 88 Super Bowl of Joe Montana hitting John Taylor in the back of the end zone. We talk about the catch two. We talk about the catch. We talk about catch three. Those are the moments that you really are solidified in your memory. And so while we as fans hate that in the moment, we love it forever.
And what's great about that game against the Packers is it ended that drought of the Packers' dominance over us in the playoffs. And now there's a shift in that sequence where now we are dominating them. And I was looking forward to seeing that again on display. However, the Lions took care of business, which made it so that now we play Seattle. So let's get into Seattle a little bit. Looking at the numbers, we talked about it before we started recording of just how, I don't know how else to say it, they're just not very good. So they're ninth. If we look at the stats offensively, they are ninth total, 372 yards offensively. Passing, they're tied for 11th with 231 yards. Rushing yards, that's where I think we take the game over because they are 18th in the league at only 120 yards. I don't think they're getting 120 yards on us. Ninth in points, just under 24 points a game. And on third down percentage, they are 20th in the league at 37.8%. So there's nothing that jumps out at you offensively. And then jumping real quick, let's go through the defensive stats. They are 28th. They are 28th in the league at giving up total yards at just under 380 yards. So that can be big. They're 13th in passing. So I know we'll talk about the rain here in a little bit on what you think that will do to Brock Purdy. But so 13th in the league isn't anything to write home about, nor is their rushing defense. They are 30th in the league in giving up 150 yards per game. So they give up all their third downs. So they're 27th in the league. They give up just under 24 points a game. There's just nothing to write home about these Seattle Seahawks, no matter how much they bash me on Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of their passing numbers are skewed because of the first half of the year. When you look at a lot of their passing success, most of that came over the first 8-9 games of the year. Teams are still wondering, what is this offense going to be under Geno Smith? And that they did have some big explosive moments. And really, you go back and you look at that Detroit Lions game they had. They just put up ridiculous offensive numbers in that game. It was over 550 yards of total offense. It was just mind blowing how much offense they put up. But when you start looking over the last 5, 6, 7 games, their offense has not been good at all by any stretch of the imagination. Their defense has not been good by any stretch. You start looking at like average time per drive. It's almost 50-50. It's like 2 minutes and 20 seconds on offense. It's like 2 minutes and 23 seconds on defense. I mean, they're as much of a middling team as you can have. They have almost as many giveaways as they have takeaways. They're +2 in turnover differential. So, they're right there. They give up as many first downs as they get. They have as many third down conversions as they give up. They are the epitome of a 50-50 team, and that's why they're 9-8, and they're only not above a 500 team because of a 17th game on the schedule. So, they are as much of a middling team as possible, and they're running into one of the juggernauts of the NFL right now. A team that, when you start looking at the landscape of the NFC, I say, San Francisco is the top two teams in the NFC when you look at the whole thing, and Seattle is 8-9 probably. I don't know how we look at that game that was played Sunday night and say that Detroit is not a better team than Seattle. Now, again, Detroit is not in the playoffs because of that horrible performance defensively they had against the Seahawks. But when you look at Geno Smith, he, over his last 5 games, 4 of them, he's at under 63% passing completion. 4 of his last 5 games. The only one that wasn't was against San Francisco. That was some of his best passing as far as completion percentage numbers on the year. He was around 71%. Okay, he was like 70.9% was what he was at. And they only put up 13 points. Nobody looks at that game and says that Seattle was a juggernaut offensively. And that was his best game since November. So, I mean, as far as us fans, I know it's easy to get there and say it's really hard to beat a team 3 times. I don't look at this offense and get worried about anything. You look at their running game with Walker, you're talking about a few explosive plays that have, again, skewed the numbers. That, like, there was one they had against the Rams. The Rams have him dead to the rights in the backfield, and they just botch a tackle, and he runs for like 20 yards off the left side. It was things like that where, the Rams are not a good defense with all the pieces that they've got missing, and he had one of his better games of the year against the Rams. Walker did, and it was still under 4 yards a carry. So it wasn't like they were just able to run. They just were able to stick with it because the Rams were so bad offensively. Like, if the Rams had a functional quarterback, they would have won that game. And we know how bad the Rams are. So, and now the one thing I will say about Seattle that I think the numbers don't tell a good story on is, like you said, they're 30th in the league in rush defense. I think they're actually better than that when you look at the film, because it's not like they give up a lot of 5, 6, 7 yard runs over and over and over again. You don't see that from this team. What you see are a lot of 2 and 3, 4 yard runs, a lot of those. And then every once in a while, you'll see a 40 yard run. They are, I think, third worst in the league at giving up explosive runs, which is runs of 12 or more yards. But they also then don't give up a lot of yards on everything else. They're not great at yards and before contact, so they give up like 2 yards before contact, somewhere around there. And then so they're not stuffing everybody. Their defensive line is really good at just being role players. They don't have anybody on the defensive line that's going to wreck your game plan, but they have guys that will plug everything up. Their linebackers have looked a lot better because their defensive line has been really good role players. But their linebackers, if they ever have an offensive line sniff at getting to their linebackers, that's where the explosive plays are coming from, because their linebackers are not good at getting off of blocks. They're not good at avoiding blocks, and they don't have the speed to make up for when that happens. These are not San Francisco's linebackers that we're playing against. So, I know that people have been really high on Barton, but when I look at him, I go, his job has been made a lot easier because of how well the defensive line has played as far as role players. They don't have anybody that jumps out at you. They have just a lot of guys that tend to just eat up space. So, so if we think back to our game, that's pretty much what you saw, was a lot of 3-4 yard runs from McCaffrey, and then you had one like 40 yard run, right? That is what you expect, what you're going to expect from this Seattle rushing defense. So, I think we kind of start thinking, okay, we're just going to run all over these guys. I don't see it being that way. I see it being a lot of grinded out runs, and then every once in a while trying to hit that explosive run.
One thing that I wanted to ask you about was the third down conversions. I'm just big on that when I see a discrepancy so high in the numbers. Let's talk a little bit about the X factors of the game. That's kind of what I'm looking at. Is there something else that you're looking at, or are you keying in on the ability to keep them off the field after third down and us able to stay on the field on especially the third and manageables?
So I think one reason that Seattle has struggled with a lot on their third downs, and what at least you see from tape, is that Geno Smith is really struggling with the quick passing game, that he's not reading things really well. And Geno Smith, what I'm seeing is that he really never looks guys off. He stares down his reads. He doesn't stare down receivers necessarily, but he's staring down reads. What I mean is that he's not getting to that second degree of processing to know, like for example, if they're running a spacing concept, and he knows, okay, they've covered it well. There's a little bit of a window, but not enough to get the third down. Of I need to look to the inside curl before I throw to the spot route. Or if I look to the inside curl, or if you look to either one, you can move that linebacker and then come back to the other one. That kind of level of quarterback play has not been happening from Geno Smith. He had, and he's been a tick slow on a few of his throws. Like he about got one of his receivers absolutely killed against the Rams. He had one, it was a deep out. It was open. Initially, he was a tick slow. The ball was a tick slow in getting there. He doesn't have the arm strength to make up when he's a little slow. It was a throw to the sideline, and his receiver got blown up. If that ball is there about 0.2 of a second earlier, it's a big gain, but he was just a tick slow. And that's what you're seeing a lot of it. There was a couple plays that he had DK Metcalf open, but he's staring down the read. He's not looking off the free safety. He's not trying to look off anybody. So with Geno, where he looks first is where the ball is going to be going. And if you keep him from getting it there, that allows the pass rush to get home. So I think that's one reason they've struggled on third downs. The other problem is, like I said, when you give up 3-4 yard runs and a team is going to stick with that, like Tampa Bay did, for example, they're going to get a 2 yard run, then they're going to get a 3 yard run or a 4 yard run. And now it's 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6. When you're in that range, their defensive backs are very good at man coverage, and they play their rules of zone coverage very, very well. That is one thing you always get from a Pete Carroll defense, is that they play their rules very well and they're very disciplined. But when you're trying to then defend against so much, when a team can run on you, they can pass on you, they can go short, they can go intermediate, they can go deep. This is all open in their playbook. It just makes it really hard to consistently get a team off the field on third downs. And so that's why with Seattle, because Seattle, I will give them this. If you aren't staying ahead of the chains with them, if you aren't staying in those third and manageables, it's really hard to get first downs on them. They are very good at that. So that's why you're seeing so many teams have now said, okay, when we get in there, we are going to stick with the run. We might only get 3 yards on 1st and 10, but we're okay with that. And we only may get 3 yards on 2nd and 7, but we're okay with that, because then we're going to have 3rd and 4, and we know we can convert that. So that's why Seattle has seen so many. When you look at the rushing totals as far as attempts on them, teams are running on them an awful lot. That's again why they're 30th, is they're not giving up, as far as, like I said, they're not giving up all of these 8, 9, 10 yard runs, is that teams are just running the ball and running the ball and running the ball. You know, you're looking at 30, 35, 40 carries a game that teams are running on them. And this has been every team except for the Chiefs, because they don't really run the ball a whole lot, period. And they use a lot of screens in their run game. And then the Jets, because the Jets couldn't do anything offensively and they had to walk away from the run game, with how that was going. But Seattle, it's going to be offensively, you grind them out. And defensively, you don't let Walker make the game easier for Geno, and you force Geno to try and take his quarterback play to a level that we have not seen really since even the beginning of the year, and I would even argue not even then. So if this game is relying on Geno Smith to make a bunch of plays, and I feel very, very good about our matchup.
So I wanted to give you a new thing, over under. So we're gonna talk Christian McCaffrey touches. Okay, do you think I'm gonna set it at 26.5? How many touches do you think he gets, over or under 26.5?
Over. Absolutely. The only way he doesn't is injury, or Elijah Mitchell comes in and is a hot hand for a number of runs. And I like how you put it as touches, because Kyle has gotten him the ball in so many different situations in so many different ways.
Oh, you have 100. It wasn't going to be carries. There's no way.
Yeah, and with McCaffrey, what I'm interested to see is some things I saw LA doing on film that I'm wondering if Kyle's going to use Elijah Mitchell and McCaffrey in, is doing a lot of misdirection. One thing that one reason they've been susceptible to some of these explosive plays is it's almost always on a misdirection or a cutback, is them over pursuing in one direction. That's where almost all of these explosive plays come from. So there was like one play against the Rams where they were faking a run one way, and they came with a wide receiver reverse, and the backside force defender ended up over pursuing out away from there, gave up the edge. And when you give up the edge, you got no chance. So he gave up the edge, and they got like a 35-yard run on that. And so that's where you can see, Christian, and I see Kyle Shanahan putting Christian McCaffrey in that role, having Elijah Mitchell in the backfield, where you have, fake it to Elijah one way, and you have a reverse with Christian McCaffrey, and you're talking 35, 40, 70 yards. Another one was a similar situation they had where I could see him putting Debo in there. They had a receiver run an inside reverse, so it looks like a wide zone to one side, and you hand it off to a receiver coming back across. So it looks like maybe a split zone, or this look that we give a few times, and they ended up getting everybody washed down one side. They picked it up, and the receiver cut through, and he gained 16 yards. Then they had another wide receiver reverse right after that, or shortly after that, was similar thing, and then it goes for 11 yards and a touchdown. Those are the kinds of explosive plays in the run game that you see Seattle giving up. And this goes back to a lot of things. Now, the one outlier would be when they were playing Las Vegas, and Jacobs just ran for right up the middle for like 80 yards. But the majority of their explosive runs have been coming off of these misdirection runs. And so that's something that I see Kyle putting both Mitchell and McCaffrey in the backfield and really utilizing. But as far as touches for McCaffrey, I say definitely over 26.5. A grinded out game, and you grind it out with maybe the best football player on the planet. I know that's a lot of praise, but when you look at McCaffrey's done for this offense, it's hard to say anything else.
So, score prediction.
I say 31-10 49ers.
Okay, I have 27-13. So we'll see. Similar, but I definitely think it'll be close in the first half, and we're a second half team defensively, and I think then that's when it kind of will get a turnover, and then Brock Purdy hands off or throws a 4-yard touchdown to Kittle is how I think that ends. So, yep, kind of along the same lines there. So we will get you out of here on this from our mailbag. Remember, in the show notes, you can always email us. But we have a question here from Wallace Gray, and he says, love seeing the new content from you. Also really happy you and John Chapman have kind of started promoting each other low-key. We talked about that, actually. I love both of y'all's takes, and it's great to see that connection. Here's the question. Ross Dwelley has been one of my favorite 49ers since 2019. There's something romantic about that underdog, or having a player step up in a backup role and still shine, kind of like Purdy's doing right now. Why do you think that our tight end depth has been rearranged? Basically, what is Croft doing and showing that has pushed him head and shoulders above Dwelley and Warner? Cheers from Canton, Michigan. Thanks for the question, Wally.
Well, thank you so much for the question, Wally. First, yes, John Chapman is a wonderful guy. I love John Chapman. He's putting out some great content. I mean, you talk about one of the top content creators out there for the 49ers. John Chapman is right there. He does a great job. He's always putting out good stuff. I try and catch a show whenever I can. I'll usually even sometimes have a show on while I'm working on stuff. So John's a great friend, and hopefully I'll be able to make it out to one of his 49ers Rush tailgates, because, man, those look like they're just amazing. But as far as the tight end question, what I think it really comes down to, and again, this underscores what Kyle really wants to do, is to be able to run the ball at will on defenses. And what Kroft has done, if you look at Kroft, I think he's much more in the player type of a Kyle Juszczyk than a Ross Dwelley. Dwelley is a decent receiver, and he's definitely more in the mold of a receiving tight end as far as what I've seen from him at the NFL level on tape. His blocking, usually his feet are not great in blocking, so he'll engage and then doesn't move his feet, so that'll allow him to lose his defender or sometimes get called for a holding penalty. Kroft, to me, just seems to be more well-rounded as a blocker. There's a little more power there. There's a little bit better pad level there, better feet, like I said. And you can put Kroft in more different positions. Kroft can be used in more ways, like a Kyle Juszczyk, than Ross Dwelley, because he's got a little bit better feet. He can have some of those cross formation blocks a little bit better. He's a little bit smoother on those. He can turn the corner a little bit better and seal guys off. So I think it really comes down to that Kroft just really is a better blocker than Ross Dwelley, and that will always be a premium from Kyle Shanahan's offense. You look at our receivers. Why is Danny Gray not on the field? I think a big part of it has to do with run blocking. You look at the big touchdown that Ray McLeod had, where who was on the field making the block on the edge? It was Willie Snead. It was not Danny Gray. Danny Gray, when you needed that block, you didn't have Danny Gray. You brought in Willie Snead to make that block. So, you look at what Brandon Ayuk, what has really helped him elevate his game this year. There's so many plays you can go back to and look at the incredible job of blocking that Brandon Ayuk has had. He has been such a key to a lot of our run game success this year. When you look at the big swing pass to Elijah Mitchell, I highlighted in my review video this week. You have this big swing pass to Elijah Mitchell that you have Deebo Samuel absolutely stealing Simmons' soul, right? Like, he just blows him up. That we put a premium on those things. George Kittle, we've seen over the years all of the great blocks that he has had. If you are going to be somebody who catches the ball in a 49ers offense, you have to be able to block with the best of them. You see us using Christian McCaffrey in lead blocking roles. Okay, we will ask everybody that is on that field to block. Every single guy. If you don't block and block well, then you can't be on the field, because what it does is it sends a message to the defense that you don't have to worry about that as much. And Kyle always wants the threat of an explosive run at all times. And he wants the ability to get on anybody with anybody. And that's what allows him to do all these different formations and do all these different things. So, Ross Dwelley, while you like the guy and you like the underdog story, Kroft is just a better blocker.
No question. You see it on the film. Tape don't lie, as they say. So again, thank you for the question. You can email us always at johnnydellsfootballacademy@gmail.com. The link is in the show notes. Please, please, please like and subscribe. We would love to be able to get guests on the show as we are growing this, and the more people that like and subscribe, the better guests that we would be able to provide for you guys and just keep the show great. Again, also thank you for all the love. Man, so many people have enjoyed that first episode, and it was really exciting to see. So I just wanted to say thank you, and stay tuned. We will have our next video after we beat the Seahawks. For Johnny Dell, I am Adam Marino. We'll see you again, faithful.